to bring and erect and get it fit for purpose. Thank you.
Follow-up, Mr. Plumber?
I must take some clarification questions from you. So from what I understand, what you told us, Infrastructure South Africa is an office or division within the DPW that will help manage infrastructure projects, but not necessarily issue the tenders for them. Am I correct on that?
Yes.
And so it's act as a consultancy through all spheres of government.
Yes.
But really about mega projects. Could you then now define what mega projects, what value or time horizon, whatever is concerned, would be defined as a mega project?
Okay.
Okay, Colonel?
Minister Matthew Freelancer, I would like to know, you mentioned Wensfield and working with the City of Cape Town on that. We also know the other two properties that's currently used by the military is Youngsfield and Yes Blood. There have long been calls for that to be used as for housing, particularly social and affordable housing. I know that the city has been calling for that because they say it's obviously a big piece of land that can be used for housing. Is that something that your department is considering? Thanks.
Okay, colleague, I would like to take this as a final round. Is there any other hand? So one side, what you mean?
Thank you very much. So, Lindsay, I think the issue of people who live in hijacked buildings for accommodation purposes projects. Now, these shovel-ready projects cannot be effectively done not on the scale that we are looking at. So if you're looking at like the Umkomazi water project that we were at a few weeks ago, it's 20 billion rand. That is not, the kind of feasibility of that is not done within the NTF. Those can take 3 or 4 or 5 years. So the BFI have actually, or the BIF has actually been incentivizing, in my view, short-term 12 or 24-month type of projects to access the funding, because that's the time limit for it to be done. So we are focused on the big mega projects. We need to look at how the financial planning of government has been done. So I think that we need to look at more planning for financial projects like 5 and 10 years as we go along. Of course, you know, there's always room for sort of small projects, but our big focuses are the Umkomazi type water schemes, the Lesotho Highlands kind of things, big energy type of projects. We were in the Eastern Cape. I think that was also a few billion there, Mametsia as well. And where ISA has got involved, either in project preparation or in looking at dealing with the blockages and so on and so forth, they have been fantastic in sorting out those problems and also being able to prepare them. So ISA is to go to your last question, then I'll deal with the other two. ISA as a one-stop shop are only where they have been designated to do so through a strategic integrated project, or through where they are requested by the private sector to do so. We are saying in the MTEF there is 900 billion rand for infrastructure in the MTEF. I think it's difficult to argue whether that whether that 900 billion rand is actually serving its purpose, and we are getting the infrastructure delivery we expect out of that 900 billion rand. The Auditor General, who gave her report yesterday, briefed us in Cabinet to say that of the 75 infrastructure projects that they had audited, 72% of them, so more than 2/3 of them, 100% of them had failed. So municipal infrastructure is a crisis in this country. And we have the view that ESA is perfectly placed to be able to take some of that MTEF budget funding, work with municipalities to design, prepare, package, and deliver these infrastructure projects, particularly around bulk infrastructure, and then being able to hand it over to them, because they just don't have the capacity or capability to do so. So that's the bigger focus that we're looking to give ESA, and to jettison them into the national space that they should be, to be able to work with other spheres of government to deliver those. Now, on the leasing portfolio, we lease around 6 billion rand a year in terms of leases. Please correct me if I'm wrong, Lwazi. And I am not convinced that we get value for money out of those leases, number one. So I think that we are paying excessive market rates for some of those buildings. And I even hesitate to bet that there are leases for buildings that don't even exist. So what we have said is we're going to do a 20% random audit of our leases. We're going to ask whether they complied with procurement regulations, whether they are in fact value for money, and then whether a government building wasn't available within the vicinity. I think too quickly people rush off for private leases when there are buildings that we possibly own. Yes, they may need to be renovated or may need to be looked at, but I'm not comfortable with the leasing portfolio that we have, considering the number of assets that we own. I have only received support from my colleagues in Cabinet, and I'm very grateful for the support that they and the President has lent me in the tough decisions that we've had to make. There were additional houses that need to be bought, but that was going to come in over 100 million rand. And I sought the President's counsel on it, and he said, absolutely not, we support you in not buying them. We'll have to look at alternative means, which we are currently busy with at the moment, that only just relates to Pretoria. But I have, even today in our Cabinet committees, I continue to receive immense support that I'm very grateful for from my Cabinet colleagues for the decisions that we've been making. Paul, absolutely, if we are embarking on restructuring and refocusing the department, there will need to be some budget changes. I would love to have more money for our budget, particularly to grow and support the work that ESA are doing. We have had to make unfortunate budget cuts. We lost 700 million rand on EPWP, which I think was not helpful for the work that they are doing. In terms of the asset register, I've been provided a report that suggests that it's nearly completed and puts a total valuation of 155 billion rand to our assets. If I'm honest with you, Paul, I'm not comfortable or convinced that the asset register in the state that it is accurate, or that the valuation is fair and true. Because I have been contacted by many members of the public to say that, did you know you own this? Do you know that you own that? Or this house was owned, but it's now been transferred to someone. And I think that there's been a lot of malfeasance with regards to the register, because it's provided a smokescreen for people to loot assets of the state, if I'm honest. And so, while it's important to get the asset register right, we need to do two things at once. We need to write the asset register as well as start looking at what we are doing with the assets that we own. How do we support the program of government? How do we support local municipalities? How do we work with other ministries to drive things like inclusionary housing, social housing, and the like? So it needs to be two things at once. I don't have an answer yet on the asset registry. I'm still applying my mind as to how we are going to bring some form of credibility, or whether it needs to be redone. But these are the sorts of things that we need to contemplate and come back to South Africa on. I just want to, there you go. I think I've spoken then about the inventory on assets. In terms of publicly hijacked buildings, we have, Lwazi, you said, 338 buildings that have been hijacked that are owned by ours. I'm very happy that we reclaimed one in eThekwini a week ago, which was Excelsior Court, after I went there to visit it. But what it shows me is that there clearly is a need to conceptualize what the state wants to do with its assets. If there are 338 buildings that have been hijacked, and I met with the mayor of eThekwini this week, which also dealt with a number of bad buildings there, it's clear that the state doesn't use all of these buildings and never will. So we then need to start optimizing them, rationalizing them, disposing of them, call it what you will. But what we can't allow is our buildings to contribute to crime in communities, in cities, be used to all manner of other things, to lower property values. It's just not fair on residents in cities and suburbs where our buildings are not being looked after or not secured. So firstly, we have to secure what we own, and then we need to start then working with municipalities on whether we want to still keep them or not. We have land that's been invaded, the Wingfield land in Cape Town. We're working with the City of Cape Town in a joint court effort to evict people who have taken that land over. We're working with the City of Cape Town in outside the Good Hope Castle. I'm hoping that that case will be finalized, or we will have an eviction order in the next couple of months there, and we'll return that asset that belongs to the people of this country to its glory, and that we can attract tourists there. And of course, we are working with many other municipalities as well. Mametsi, I don't know if there's anything that you'd like to add then on the ESA side of things and the work that you guys are doing there.
No, Minister, just to say also to add that obviously we have pivoted our own project pipeline, the projects, to focus on supporting the key priorities of government. So if you look at the top 12 priority projects that were launched by the President in March for project preparation, those projects are focusing on supporting ports, infrastructure investment into ports to deal and address the issues of logistics and congestion, supporting the special economic zones, especially on the provision of bulk, municipal bulk infrastructure, so that we can unlock those investments in those areas. And of course, like the Minister said, the water and sanitation projects, both bulk water provision as well as wastewater treatment, reticulated water infrastructures. Those will be the key priorities on our side. From a social infrastructure perspective, we are looking at the program approach for these, because Infrastructure South Africa cannot get involved in projects that are less than 1 billion rand from a value perspective. So in the social infrastructure space, we're looking at only health infrastructure as well as education infrastructure, and we're looking at supporting and looking at the preparation and packaging of and quantifying really how much, what is the funding that is required to turn around the schools infrastructure, those schools that are not compliant with norms and standards of the Department of Basic Education, schools with inappropriate ablution facilities, asbestos roofs, and so on. So we're working with the Department of Basic Education in KwaZulu-Natal as well as Limpopo, Northern Cape, and the Eastern Cape. Just on the two provinces of the Eastern Cape and Northern Cape, just these two provinces alone, our indications is that we need something in the region of 79 billion rand just to address the current backlogs of schools with inappropriate infrastructure. And so the fiscus can never carry that type of funding for the BOLD program into the schools. So our preparation and packaging of these programs is to ensure that we are going to be able to leverage private sector financing into these projects. So we are applying the legislative framework that is now available to the provinces to pledge the future allocations of grants for schools infrastructure, to pledge those, but to get private sector financing in the short to medium term to address the schools backlog and wake up the mechanisms such that the people that are putting in the money, the funders, the financiers, are able to get the rate of return from investing in these type of projects. So that will be some of the priorities that we're looking at from a future pipeline perspective. Thanks, Minister.
Darcy, is anything from a governance or point that you want to, or any questions that you want to add there?
Thank you, Minister. Just in addition, it's the issue around the asset register. I think it's a continuous journey around the asset register as you're looking at newly acquired facilities as well as the disposal of those facilities. But also, as the Minister highlighted about the hijacked building, it's a continuous process of continuous identification of those buildings as well. Because there are cost implications when you're looking at that. I think it's spending about 11.8 million per annum in terms of rents and taxes, legal costs, as well as your aspects of securing those buildings as well. So you need to look at the return of those in terms of the cost that we spend on those and vis-a-vis the actual amount that we can actually generate from the usage of those buildings as well. So it's a continuous process of enhancing the asset register as well. Thanks.
Thank you. And then also what I want to say is, what I've also said to the department is I want us to start looking at examples of experimenting as well. So as an example, in eThekwini, we have this former police barracks. As you drive into the city, it's been completely stripped. There's nothing left there. And for 5 years, the police have been unable to tell us whether they want to use the building or not. So it's this back and forth, back and forth. So we've now written to them and said, you must now tell us in 30 days whether you're going to keep the building or not, at your cost, obviously. And if they come back to us and say, well, we don't need it anymore, we're then going to put out a request for proposals to the public. And we're going to say, well, let's see what the public thinks we can use this building for. So we can actually then start to see, well, are there better uses for these buildings? Excelsior Court in eThekwini, a well-known, documented problem there, in the middle of a residential suburb. We're going to use that as an example as well. So buildings being completely stripped, and we're then going to also then put out a request for proposals and see what can we do else with that building. Maybe another government department wants it, maybe the municipality wants it, maybe a developer wants it, maybe we go into a JV with someone that we take space in the building. These are the kind of things that we want to play around with and start to find a better model and a better use for our public buildings than just sitting empty and being used for other criminal activities.
Sorry, what BR is?
Yeah,
A budget is the budget facility for infrastructure.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
Sits within Treasury.
Thank you.
you want to clarify a bit what it's all about?
Yes. So National Treasury has put in place a BFI, so the Budget Facility for Infrastructure process. It simply seeks to augment the current fiscal allocation for capital projects on an annual basis. So they'll set aside, say for example, 4 billion, 5 billion rand a year, and people or project sponsors, project owners can apply to access that funding for specific infrastructure projects that they're embarking on, but those projects do not have an allocation, so they don't have budget. So you apply, you compete with others to access that particular funding, which is run by the National Treasury. And of course, Infrastructure South Africa also sits with the National Treasury team in evaluating these applications and looking at those projects that are aligned with the priorities of government, and they must satisfy a number of requirements set up by the National Treasury. So what the Minister is saying is that the process sits only once or twice a year, meaning in May and June. That's the twice in a year. So in essence, it's essentially once a year. What it does is that it encourages, because the requirement is that the projects must be shovel ready. It means projects that are really at this very small scale can apply to access that funding, because the shovel readiness is defined as those projects that are ready to go into implementation as soon as the money is received. And so part of the reforms that we're looking to have is that it needs to sit in a little bit more regularly than once a year, so that the projects that are ready now to be looked at from a funding perspective, already it is August. If you have those projects ready now, you have to wait until 2025 May. Then you do your submission, and it goes through the budget processes, etc. And then your allocation only comes in 2026, April of 2026. So those are types of the structural processes, structural reforms that are required, inherent in the budget process, to enable the acceleration to finance and fund projects that are ready. But those projects need to be, truly speaking, really truly catalytic. They need to be absolute national priorities to respond to the current infrastructure deficit. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Head Officer. Then next round, I'll start with you, Lindsay, at Bloomberg. I see ground up here, and then, so in that order.
Thanks, Lennox. Lindsay Dentling, Eyewitness News. Minister, firstly, on the hijacked buildings, many of them are occupied or used by those who have hijacked them to live in. It's living space. Is there not a way, given the dire shortage of proper housing for people in South Africa, a way that these can possibly be repurposed for housing? And then secondly, just if you could just give us a progress update on the dome being moved here to Parliament. We understand there's some repair work that needs to be done. The Speaker says the bill for bringing it here will be Public Works, for Public Works' account. Do you have the money for that, and do you have an indication of what that might cost to bring and erect and get it fit for purpose? Thank you.
Follow up, Bloomberg.
Minister, some clarification questions from you. So from what I understand, what you told us, Infrastructure South Africa is an office or division within the DPW that will help manage infrastructure projects, but not necessarily issue the tenders for them. Am I correct on that?
Yes.
And so it acts as a consultancy through all spheres of government.
Yes.
But really about mega projects. Could you then now define what mega projects, what value or time horizon, whatever is concerned, would be defined as a mega project?
Okay.
Okay, Rhonda?
Minister Matthew Freelancer, I would like to know, you mentioned Wensfield and working with the City of Cape Town on that. We also know the other two properties that's currently used by the military is Yansfield and Hijacked. There's been long been calls for that to be used as for housing, particularly social and affordable housing. I know that the city has been calling for that because they say it's obviously a big piece of land that can be used for housing. Is that something that your department is considering? Thanks.
Okay, colleagues, I would like to take this as a final round. Any other hand? Going one, twice. Over to me.
Thank you very much. So, Lindsay, I think the issue of people who live in hijacked buildings for accommodation purposes projects. Now, these shovel-ready projects cannot be effectively done not on the scale that we are looking at. So if you're looking at like the Umkomazi water project that we were at a few weeks ago, it's 20